love, the only one that you love. Life could be a dream. Sweetheart, hello, then shaboom, and over me to boom.
I have to start this video with this clip because that was the last time I would genuinely smile this episode, because after this moment, which is so sweet, so beautiful, man, was I stressed? Did I go through a lot of emotions? I never smiled again the rest of this episode because a lot happened. What a finale. What do we do to deserve this? I went through so much emotion, so much trauma. My goodness. Hey guys, Shalana here. Welcome to the Bingezone. On today's video, we're talking Lovecraft Country episode 10, titled Full Circle. It's the season finale, y'all, or maybe the series finale. I'm not sure yet. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. But guys, before we dive into this episode, because a lot happened, this is the culmination of the entirety of 10 episodes. All the plot lines, everything converged on this one episode. And man, did I go through the ringer. But before we begin, guys, this video is brought to you by the Magical Negro Podcast. That's my podcast where we dive deep into Lovecraft and other movies. The link for the podcast is in the description box below. The Magical Negro Podcast, where we actually break down all of episode 10. We go into great detail that we can't go into a YouTube video. So definitely check that out. But let's dive into this video because, man, what an ending. This episode starts off right where episode 9 ends, and we have our characters bringing Dee back to the Freeman home, and they have the Book of Names. They place Dee on the bed, they open the Book of Names, and both Letty and Tick collapse, and they find themselves in a metaphysical realm in which Tick is reunited with his mother Dora, and Letty's reunited with great-grandma Hattie, and they both have their own roles to play in this coming confrontation with Christina, and Tick finally meets his mother. This is the first interaction we have between Tick and his mom, and we see how Tick reverts to being a child in front of his mother because it's Mama Dukes. Like, you're always going to revert back to being a kid in front of Mama, and Tick doesn't want to die. He wants to find a way. He read the book. He knows he dies. Tick had this feeling for a few episodes now that he's going to die, but he doesn't want to die. And at the same time, Hattie is explaining to Letty what this realm is and how they can stop Christina. And both of these guys have to confront the fact that Tick will die. And if they're ready to sacrifice Tick, they can actually win this war of magic against Christina Braithwaite. Tick realizes this is his lot in life. This is his journey. He has to sacrifice himself for his next generation because great-great-great-grandmama Hannah did it. Hattie did it. Dora did it. Now it's Tick's turn to actually sacrifice for the upcoming Freeman generations, for his bloodline to continue and for them to stop the Braithwaites once and for all. So they cure Dee, and Letty gets a spell from Hattie, and we see that Hattie said the Book of Names was never opened, but she is accustomed to magic. She knows about it. She's well versed in it, and she gives Letty a spell. Tick and Letty then go to Letty's house. They use the elevator. They find themselves back in Titus Braithwaite's cavern, and they cause a spell, and they conjure up the man, the myth, the legend, Titus Braithwaite. We've been hearing about this guy since the first episode, never saw him. And this guy is the piece of shit we thought he was. This guy is the supreme sorcerer we thought he was, because the moment they conjure him up, he leaves. And he shows that he is a master of magic, and he gets to Christina. He tells Christina, yo, them N-words, they have the Book of Names. How'd you let this happen? Get it from them. But then they pull Titus back because we summoned you for a reason. Get your ass back here, sir. They summon Titus back. And we see that it wasn't just Tick and Letty. Now it's all the women of Tick bloodline. We have Letty, we have Hannah, we have Hattie, we have Dora. And they conjure up a spell. They bind Titus, and Tick takes a piece of his flesh. And now I'm assuming they're going to use the flesh to combine Tick's flesh with Christina's flesh to actually stop the spell from happening and to stop Christina's plans. And it was cool. The fact that it was the women of this bloodline that actually had enough magic to stop him and stop Titus Braithwaite. Because remember, Hannah was the one who stopped his ritual in the first place. And it's the women, the black women of this bloodline that are powerful enough to stop Titus Braithwaite. I found that really cool. Speaking of black women, we shift to Dee and Hippolyta, and Dee is angry at her mother, rightfully so. You left me. My daddy died. You left. My friend died. I got cursed. I have trauma. This entire episode can be culmination, not this entire episode, this entire season can be linked to one word, trauma. And Dee is handling her trauma in a better way than Montrose ever did, or Tick, so I like that. But she has beef with Hippolyta. You left me. And Hippolyta had to explain to Dee why she did it. And Hippolyta shows her a new comic book. It's the adventures of Arithia, Blue, and Astari. And we see that Hippolyta and Dee are going to go to future space adventures. I'm looking forward to this. They're dropping nuggets on a potential second season because that's a new plotline, a new development. And Hippolyta takes Dee to a room, and that room has all these contraptions, and we already know what it is because Tick came from the future. He said there was a stranger with a metal arm. Dee lost her arm. Hippolyta said, no, you will draw again. So now we're laying the groundworks for future seasons, and we're laying the groundworks for the story as itself to come full circle, because every plot point that has happened is being addressed in this episode. And man, it's just masterful story writing. What can I say? So while the crew is trying to figure out a spell to stop Christina, Christina comes through all disheveled and she's shook. And she's like, you guys have the book of names. I need the book of names. Give it to me. Atticus, I know I tried to kill you. It's nothing personal. It's my spell. Give me the book. It's like she's a crack fiend. Give me the book. I need the book. I'll spare you. I'll never do this again. Give me the book. And Tick's like, I'm surrounded by family. Like, you're not my family. You're not getting the book. Get out of here. We got this. And Christina's fuming. And like I said last video, she is petty. So as she's walking by, she takes the mark of Cain from Letty. And that just proves to us what Christina's all about. She's all about getting her shit together. And even though throughout the episodes, we see that she's not really harming anybody, she's manipulative as fuck. She thought maybe by giving the mark of Cain, helping out, they would actually have a soft spot for her. And when that doesn't work, she's like, give me my shit. And she just leaves. And that pretty much solidifies her fate. We have to stop Christina. She is not for us at all. Tick then decides to go meet Jihad at the hotel. And I'm like, oh, Jihad's still around. And guys, I owe Jihad an apology. And I owe episode 6 another apology. Because I talked about how that was my least favorite episode. I talked about how it had no significant contributions to the later seasons. And I was wrong. I ate my words. Shame on me. Shame on me. Shame on me. Because when Tick talks to Gia and they come to that connection. And you see that what they had was real love. I called it the Nightingale effect, but it's actual real love, and it's more than just romantic love. They formed a bond, and that bond is with them forever. Tick lost George, a parent, and Gia lost the mom, and Tick brings her into the fold, and Tick invites her to hang with the family, and it's like, okay, now everything is coming full circle. And there we have it again, the theme of this episode, the title, Full Circle, all the plot points coming together. It's like, okay, throughout this entire season, we've had all these characters being terrorized because of where they live, their orientation, what kind of creature they are. All of them are being oppressed in some way, shape, or form by the oppressive American system. Whether it's GI in Korea, whether it's the black people in Jim Crow America, they're all being oppressed by essentially the same overarching bad guy, bad system, bad person, race, with the right race. It's all embodied in Christina. So now we have all of them coming together, standing up. And that's what it is. All people of color or POC coming together to fight against this. And I'm like, okay, I see where this show's going. I see the culmination. We're going to team up against Christina. The embodiment of everything wrong with society at the time and society today. A white woman who has magic. Yeah, that is everything wrong with society, right? Letty then meets Ruby at their mom's gravesite and they have a back and forth. And Letty's explaining to Ruby, this is what family's about. And Ruby's like, nah, you always use me. No more. I'm done. Every time you need a favor, I'm here. I'm out. Letty says, hold on. Before you go, I have something else to say. And we cut. And next thing we know, Ruby is talking to Christina. And Ruby and Christina actually have real feelings for each other. And I'm like, hold on. No, Christina actually cares about Ruby. But is Ruby finessing her? And we have another plot point. What did Letty say to Ruby? My theory is that Letty told Ruby that we're going to stop white people from having magic and we're going to have all the magic to ourselves. Because remember, Ruby's whole thing is, I'm hustling Christina for magic because she has it all. But Letty's like, nah, nah, no. I have the book of names. I have magic. Here's my plan, and we're going to stop Christina. And Ruby flips and tries to stop Christina, and she kisses her at that moment. I'm like, okay. Ruby is usually kind of, get off me, Christina, to Christina. She's never embracing. The fact that she embraced Christina and kissed her, I'm like, okay, she's up to something. She's finessing. She's scamming, clearly. Whatever Letty said to her was powerful enough to have her switch sides. And we all owe Ruby an apology. I'm going to be the first one to say it. I kind of ragged on her last episode. But throughout social media, a lot of people have been dragging her, calling her all types of things, calling her out her name. And it's like, bruh, this show actually did something masterful with that, because as a society, when black women decide to step out and step for themselves and stand up for themselves, look how much slander she got for just wanting to be unapologetically herself, an uninterrupted black woman, and they killed her. And even though I didn't go as hard as some other people, I participated in our Ruby Baptiste an apology. And again, this is masterful writing from the Lovecraft Country staff, because it shows, even though it's a fictional character, we still react in the real world the same way to a black woman trying to stand up and be her own woman. Letty then takes Tick to get baptized, and Tick is a bit like, I don't want to get baptized. And at this point, it's letting us know that we don't see it as the audience just yet. We don't know what's going to happen. But Tick and Letty has been resigned to Tick's fate. He's going to die. So the one thing they can do is bless his soul so he doesn't end up down there, because he's been dabbling in magic. He's been doing shit he shouldn't have been doing. So they're trying to save Tick's soul at the very least. And at first, I didn't get that. I'm like, why is Tick getting baptized? But you have to understand, once you get baptized, you give your life over to God. And throughout the episodes, we've been seeing Letty has been working her way towards God. Montrose never gave up. Even when he was casting the spell for the Blagoth, he actually added an amen to the end of the enchantment because he believed in God. And throughout this entire thing, space travel, H.P. Lovecraft, magic, of course, God is a real thing in this universe because if all those things exist, God exists and Tick is turning his life over. And that should have been foreshadowing. I should have braced myself. We should have braced ourselves for what's to come. But we didn't think of it that way. We just thought of Tick getting baptized. I don't even know why. I didn't know what I thought initially. I'm like, oh, that's weird. But I guess he's doing it for Letty just to be safe. Not knowing that he was resigned to his fate. Letty knew what was going to happen. Tick knew. And we were unaware. Montrose was unaware. And it's like, oh, the signs were right there in front of us. And we let it go. Damn. Good writing. And I love the scene afterwards because you see Tick in the Freeman store and he turns around and he's surrounded by his loved ones. The love of his life, Letty, carrying his child. His father, Montrose, there, a changed man. You see his cousin, his aunt, and even Gia. It's one big happy family. And Tick looks around and you could see like he's taking it all in. Again, with him taking it all in, it's him being resigned to his fate. At the time, we're not aware. We're like, okay, this is a nice moment. And as they're going to the car, we see Ruby shows up and she has the blood of Christina. And Ruby comes in the car. I'm like, oh my God, they're going to win. I'm happy. I'm excited. I'm like, okay, they won up Christina. They're about to do this thing. They get in the car, they're driving, and then they start singing and everyone jumps in. And I'm like, okay, this is pretty cute. And it's when Montrose jumps in, I get a big smile on my face because we all know I love Montrose. And when he jumps into singing, I'm like, this is a beautiful moment. Like, I'm smiling ear to ear. I should have known better. It's a horror show. It's a sci-fi show. It's a magic show. I should have known better. If they're happy, you can't be happy for too long. But I was caught up in the emotion. Lovecraft is not just a show. It's an experience. It's a journey. And when the characters smile, we smile. When they're sad, we feel what they feel. And at the moment, I was totally entrenched in my feelings as to the same thing they're feeling. I'm feeling what they're feeling. I'm in there. I'm singing along. My subtitles are on. I'm jamming with the crew. And then we get to Artem. And they break up to different sections. And Montrose and Tick go somewhere. And they're starting a big salt circle to start the spell to stop Christina. And I'm like, okay. And Montrose and Tick get somewhere. And Tick pulls out the piece of Titus and Christina's blood. And I'm like, okay, how is Tick about to do this? Is he going to take the blood, use it as A1 sauce, and eat it up? Because that would be the best thing. Like, is that the seasoning, the little razzle dazzle on Titus's meat? But no, Tick just eats it raw and then chugs the blood. And I'm like, and I love Montrose's response, just pinch and swallow. But Tick, just a moment of advice. Take it, dip it, douse it, one bite, you're done. Instead of doing separate. But Montrose, being the trooper that he is, and he always carries his trusty flask, he gives it to Tick so he can wash it down. And it's like, Tick just ate a white man and drank a white woman's blood. Ooh, nasty. Just nasty. So then Tick makes his way to the ruins of the Braithwaite Manor, and he's surrounded by these white people from 1770 whatever, and they're there and they're just grabbing the bag off. And I'm like, yo, like he turned himself in, like chill out. But my antennas were raised at this moment because why are they here? I understand it's a ritual, but like it's a lot of them. And then we switch to Ruby and Letty, and they're setting up symbols to get the spell ready, and they're talking. And then Ruby says something about family. I'm like, Ruby don't talk like that. And Letty peeped. Ruby does not talk like that. Because they're sisters, even though they fight like cats and dogs, like they understand each other. And she knows Letty is like, Ruby would never say that. And she peeps and she finds out, and they get in a fist fight. And man, this fight is brutal. Guys, remember, Letty's pregnant and Ruby's just beating him. Like, yo, that's not Ruby, that's Christina. And she lets it be known, I am Christina. I caught Ruby. I promised Ruby I would not hurt you, but I never said anything about not killing you. I'm like, look at this shit. When you're dealing with white people of that stature, always read the fine print because they're always going to loophole you. Ruby did not read the fine print. The fine print is, I will not harm your sister. I never said anything about killing you. And she says that she killed Ruby, and she starts beating Letty's ass. And she punches Letty in the gut. I'm like, yo, like, that is your cousin's in there. And she doesn't care. And she just tosses her out the building, and she falls from the tower. And this is what Lovecraft does to you. They could have showed her being tossed out the window and her falling on the ground. But they showed us her falling. Boom. Letty's dead. Letty's dead. Oh shit. I'm a mess. I'm an emotional mess. Because at this point, they've been set up. Letty died in the most gruesome way. Tick is captured. And then Montrose, Hippolyta, and Gia are surrounded. And I love Montrose. He gets surrounded. The first thing he does is he pulls his sleeves up. He's ready to throw hands. But of course, Montrose is just a regular brawler. But Hippolyta, I am Hippolyta, the homie warrior, is fighting like 10 of them by her damn self, fucking them up with her training. And I'm waiting for Gia to do something and nothing happens. And they get over him. Montrose is the first to be knocked out. I'm like, all right, Montrose, man. Like, as a fan of you, as a stan, you're embarrassing me. You're the first to get knocked out. But of course, Hippolyta did her best. But the numbers were too much and they're all captured. Letty's dead. Hippolyta captured. Montrose knocked out. Gia captured. Tick is being strapped up. And then we switch to D. And I'm like, oh my God. They left D by herself again. Did they not learn from 2 episodes ago? And then we hear Shagat running around. And I'm like, okay, what's happening here? And then the Shagat comes out of nowhere. It's about to eat Christina. And then the Blagat comes. Bam! Remember, guys, Tick's Shagat is black. So we call it a Blagat instead of a Shagat. It comes and it beats the shit out of this other Shagat. And it reigns supreme. And it belongs to D now. And Tick is now crucified. This episode has heavy biblical references throughout. Because not only did Tick get baptized, we also see him being crucified. Tick is legit being crucified the same way Jesus was. Instead of getting nails on the wrist, Christina slashes him and his blood oozes out. This episode reeks of biblical symbolism, and Tick is legit dying for our sins, dying to protect us. He's dying to stop white people and end magic. And then Letty comes out of nowhere. She has the mark of Cain. I'm trying to figure out, when did this happen? But then Christina is there and doing the spell, and she's bathing in Tick's blood. And I'm like, yo, Christina has to go. I tried to defend her a few episodes ago and saying she hasn't done anything evil, but she was biding her time. She is the most evil of them all. The fact that it's your family and you're not taking any of this personal, your indifference is by far evil and way worse than malevolence. Indifference is by far worse than hating someone for no reason. You just don't give a fuck. Like, you didn't care about Emmett Till. You don't care about your cousin. You set your dad up. All you want is ultimate power to become the supreme goddess. It's time for her to go. Letty tries, but the spell has happened. And I'm like, God, Christina won. Jesus, Tick is dying. But remember, I apologized earlier in this video because Gia has a role to play. And her Mugan said that she had to become the darkness. When she jumps in the darkness and connects Christina to Tick, and then we get visions of what happened, we see how everything was set up. Tick's baptism, Christina catching Ruby in the act, Tick giving the Shagat to D, Ruby getting drained by Christina, Tick leaving Montrose a letter with Hippolyta, Christina giving the mark of Cain back to Letty, Tick hugging Montrose. All of that happens in vision. And we see the things that we didn't see are finally, we have a full picture. Everything is full circle. The entirety of the show is now understood. And I want to say something. And I know we've been slandering Christina throughout this episode because she deserves it, rightfully so. But she did love Ruby. Because not only did she keep her word to Ruby, even though she threw Letty out the window, she actually gave her the mark of Cain. Because remember, the mark of Cain actually heals you, and that's why she was testing it a few episodes ago. I know a lot of people said she wanted to feel empathy towards Emmett Till, but remember, Christina don't give a fuck about nobody, so it was never about empathy for Emmett Till. It was always about her testing the healing properties of the mark of Cain, and she gave it back to Letty, and that's her way of thanking Ruby for what she did, even though she killed Ruby. Or did she? Because remember, Christina made sure to tell us that while they're dead, they're not really dead, they're in a comatose state, they're in a coma. So Ruby is in a coma. Another plot point that's left hanging. It's like, okay, this could be the season finale, or they're letting us know that there's enough story to go around. But while this is happening, Christina's now mortal and she gets collapsed upon. And I'm like, yes, finally. But it's too late. Montrose wakes up, runs to his son, and I cried. Because Montrose, throughout all his fuckery, he suffered. Now, I can't say he suffered the most because every main character suffered so much, but Tick gave the ultimate sacrifice. And we found out that spell that Letty cast was not a spell to stop Christina from getting magic, because in the book, they stopped the Christina character, the male version of Christina in the book, from having magic. But in this show, it's not just Christina. Letty goes a step beyond and says, white people, no more magic for white people. And I'm like, Tick sacrificed himself for all of them. That's what Hannah was telling. Not all of his family, but the entire world, all black people. Tick is legit a messiah figure for us. Tick is Jesus for black people in a sense. He gave his life to protect all of us. And I'm sitting here like, yo, that is the ultimate sacrifice. I know Tick didn't want to die, but I'm pretty sure when he found out that what he can do if he dies will be for the betterment of all black people, and he went to the future where white people were writing, and you have his son who's now an author who wrote Lovecraft Country. You have D with the cybernetic arm. You have I Am Hippolyta. You have G.I. Tick's like, okay, I need to die in order for this greatness for black people, for us to have magic, for us to finally have the power. And he gave his life. I cried. That is powerful. Montrose cried. And then they carried Tick away. And I'm like, wow, what an ending. I was a mess. But Christina wasn't dead yet, because D shows up and says, you never learn. And she uses her bionicle arm. And that shit looks pretty cool. It's steampunk. And she chokes Christina's neck out. She snaps him. And she got howls at the moon. And the show ends. And I'm like, you can't end like this. This can't be the finale. But it is. Or is it? Because this is the season finale, but there's enough plot points where the show can continue for a second season. Because in this episode, we wrap up so much plot points. We talk about family, trauma. We talk about the biblical metaphors of Tick. I get more into all of this in the podcast, the Magical Negro podcast. So definitely check that out in the description box below, because I really dive deep into the meaning behind some of these things. So definitely check that out, guys. But overall, that is the end of Lovecraft Country. Tick is a messiah figure, and he carried the sins of his Braithwaite ancestors. He died for all black people, and essentially he sacrificed his life for the next generation. He's building upon something that Hannah started, generation after generation. The sacrifice of the previous generation goes on to the next generation. Even Hattie did that last episode. You sacrifice yourself for your next generation, because you are the catalyst for the next change. And I love that about Lovecraft Country, guys. But anyway, that's the end of this video. That's the end of Lovecraft Country. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, guys. And definitely check out the podcast, the Magical Negro podcast. Guys, until next time, binge on.